Welcome to today's On This Day in Tudor History. I'm Claire Ridgway. I'm founder of the Tudor Society and also the Anne Boleyn Files website, and I'm author of this book, which I'm sure you already know, On This Day in Tudor History, which has inspired the daily On This Day videos that I'm doing every day this year. Now, today's On This Day in Tudor History video, I'm taking you back to 1515, which of course is in the reign of King Henry VIII. This is an event to do with Mary Tudor, who was the favourite sister of King Henry VIII. She was his younger sister. Because the 3rd of March 1515 is one of the dates that is given in contemporary sources for the secret marriage of Mary, who was Dowager Queen of France at the time, and Charles Brandon, Duke of Suffolk, who was the king's best friend at the time. Now, the bells are ringing out for their marriage, obviously. I don't actually time the bells, they just go off regularly. Now, 18-year-old Mary Tudor had been widowed on the 1st of January 1515 when her first husband, the 52-year-old King Louis XII of France, had died, and this was only 3 months after their marriage. Now, when the marriage had been negotiated, Henry VIII, had negotiated this marriage for Mary. Mary had made her brother, the king, promise that if Louis died before her, which obviously she expected him to because he was in his 50s and she was just 18, that her brother, the king, would allow her to then marry a man of her choosing, because she really didn't want to marry Louis XII. She did it because her brother wanted her to. And after Louis's death, she reminded her brother of this deal in a letter saying, "I beseech your grace that you will keep all the promises that you promised me when I take my leave of you by the waterside." And she added that she wished to marry where my mind is. She also threatened to enter a convent if her brother, the king, reneged on his promise. And if she had taken the veil and entered a convent, that would mean that the king would sort of lose control over her dower, the money that she had. So that wouldn't have been, her going into a convent, her becoming a nun would not have been ideal for King Henry VIII. So, she wanted him to keep his promise, and she was threatening to go into a convent if he didn't. Now, Mary had, of course, fallen in love with Charles Brandon, Duke of Suffolk, the very man that her brother had sent out to France to escort her back to England following Louis XII's death. Now, the king knew that the two of them, wanted to marry, and he'd made Suffolk promise that he wouldn't marry Mary without Henry VIII's permission. But Suffolk broke that promise. He excused his actions in a letter that he wrote to Cardinal Thomas Wolsey, explaining that he just had to rescue Mary. He had to marry her. He was rescuing a damsel in distress. There was nothing else that he could do. He had to marry her. He wrote that when he came to Paris, he heard many things which put him and the Queen in great fear, and the Queen would never let me be in rest till I had granted her to be married. And so, to be plain with you, I have married her. So that was his excuse for marrying her without the king's permission. And obviously, Suffolk wanted Cardinal Wolsey to then sort of intercede with the king on his behalf, because he obviously knew that the king was not going to be happy with him breaking his promise. Now, we don't know for sure when this first secret marriage took place. A French contemporary chronicle, which is found in the Bibliothèque Nationale, records the secret marriage as taking place on the 3rd of March 1515, on this day in Tudor history. And Louise of Savoy, who was mother of the new king, Francis I, she records it as taking place on the Saturday of the last day of March, i.e. Saturday the 31st of March 1515. However, in his letter to Cardinal Wolsey, in which he confesses their secret marriage, Suffolk wrote that he and Mary had consummated their marriage and that he feared that she was now pregnant. So it was important for them to then have a public marriage because of this fear of pregnancy, for everyone to know that they were in fact married. And this letter to Wolsey was dated the 5th of March 1515. So it seems to make more sense that they were married before the 3rd of March 1515, because surely Suffolk wouldn't have been panicking just 2 days after their marriage. So it kind of suggests that they actually married earlier than the 3rd of March. But are there any other records that can help us narrow down the date of this first secret marriage? Well, we have a record of a meeting between King Francis I of France and the Duke of Suffolk on Thursday, the 1st of February 1515. And at that meeting, the French king accused Suffolk of coming to France to marry the Queen, your master's sister. And Suffolk denied that profusely, saying that it would be great folly for him to come to France to marry the Dowager Queen without Francis I's knowledge or without the permission of his master, King Henry VIII. And he assured Francis that it wasn't his or his king's intention for him to do that. However, Francis caught him in a lie, for the French king had already spoken to Mary, and she had, he said, broken her mind unto him and spilled out the couple's plan of getting married. And Francis had said to Mary that he would help her and do what was possible in him to help her to obtain her heart's desire. Her heart's desire being to marry Suffolk, of course. So Suffolk got caught out in his lie. He then thanked the king for the great goodness he intended to show to himself and the Queen. And Suffolk recorded this meeting and what happened with Francis in a letter written to Cardinal Wolsey on the 3rd of February 1515, so 2 days later, written 10 leagues from Paris. So we know that Mary and Suffolk had not married at this point, but that they were planning to marry very soon. Now, Mary Croom Brown, who wrote a book on Mary Tudor, she points out in her book that Suffolk must have been overjoyed that, the French king was willing to help them, that he wanted to help Mary get her heart's desire. And Croom Brown writes of how Suffolk reached Paris on the 4th of February, and that Mary, knowing that he'd got there, then sent for him. He was greeted by a very emotional Mary, who begged him then to marry her before they returned to England. Now, although Francis I had assured Suffolk that he'd told Mary that he was going to help her get her heart's desire and that he was supporting the idea of them getting married, Francis I did not expect the couple to marry in secret while he was trying to help them, but it appears that they did. In the Chronicle of Louis XII, Robert III de la Marck, Seigneur of Florange and the Marshal of France, records the French king's subsequent fury at the Duke of Suffolk. I am advertised of this thing. I did not think you had been so base, and if I chose to do my duty, I should this very hour have your head taken off your shoulders, for you have failed of your faith, and trusting to your faith, I have not had watch kept over you. You have secretly, without my knowledge, married Queen Mary. Now, Robert de la Marck does not date Francis I's reaction to news of the couple's secret marriage, where, he is saying that, he would have taken Suffolk's head off his shoulders. This section of the Chronicle simply says March 1515 in the margin. Suffolk's biographer, Stephen Gunn, and his work on Charles Brandon, I really, really do recommend. He dates the secret marriage to mid-February. Mary Croom Brown, in her biography of Mary, dates it to about the second week of February. And then Mary Ann Everett and Agnes Strickland date their marriage to taking place in Lent, which in 1515 started on the 21st of February. And Agnes Strickland and Mary Ann Everett are working on the date that the French Chronicle gives, the 3rd of March 1515 date. What we can conclude is that Mary and Suffolk married secretly sometime after the 3rd of February, which is the date when Suffolk wrote to Cardinal Wolsey of his meeting with Francis I, and at least a couple of weeks before Suffolk's 5th of March letter to Wolsey, which of course is the letter when he's writing about them having consummated the marriage and him fearing that Mary could be pregnant. So a mid-February date, which is what Stephen Gunn says, really does make sense when we put all of that together. Now, this secret marriage would have taken place probably at the chapel at the Hotel de Cluny in Paris, which was where Mary was staying after the death of King Louis XII, while she was put there to see if she was pregnant with the king's child, because of course that child would then have been heir to the throne instead of Francis I. So that's where she was staying. This secret marriage, whenever it happened, mid-February, was then followed by a more public marriage, that marriage that Suffolk wanted because he feared that Mary could be pregnant. And that is recorded as having taken place on the 31st of March 1515, that date that Francis I's mother, Louise of Savoy, wrote in her journal. These two weddings, the secret marriage and the public marriage in France, were followed by an official wedding in England when the couple got back to England. They were married at Greenwich on the 13th of May 1515 in the presence of King Henry VIII and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Now, Henry VIII may have been furious, spitting with fury at the time with the couple, because of course they married without his permission, but he did go on to forgive them. Suffolk's biographer Stephen Gunn writes, Henry's displeasure was mollified by the surrender of Mary's jewels and plate, half her dowry, the wardship of the now redundant Lady Lisle, and a further £24,000 payable over 12 years from the profits of Mary's dower lands in France. So, although he might have forgiven them because Suffolk was his best friend and Mary was his beloved sister, there was a financial element as well, just to ease his displeasure. Now, Mary and Suffolk went on to have 4 children: Henry, Frances, who of course went on to become the mother of Lady Jane Grey, Eleanor, and then a second Henry who was born after the death of their first Henry. They were married for 18 years, and their marriage only came to an end when Mary died on the 25th of June 1533. Suffolk, of course, went on to marry his ward, Catherine Willoughby. So there you have it. Today, on this day in Tudor history, 3rd of March 1515, is one of the dates given for secret marriage for Mary, who was the Dowager Queen of France, and Charles Brandon, Duke of Suffolk. It may be that they did have some kind of ceremony on this date, but it is more likely that it happened in mid-February. But this date is one mentioned in the contemporary sources. So that's today's on this day in Tudor history. You can press that button there to subscribe to this channel. You can hit the bell to be notified of new videos, and I do hope that you're enjoying these daily videos. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll be back with some more Tudor trivia. See you then. Take care. Bye bye.